From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
The political fallout continues from last week's election, with control of the House still unknown nearly a week after the polls closed. Democrats regained control of the Senate over the weekend as Catherine Cortez Masto defeated Adam Laxalt in Nevada, guaranteeing 50 seats for the Democrats, with the Georgia runoff still to be determined on December 6th. But the big unknown is still the House, where the Republicans hold 212 seats already won now, and Democrats 205, with close to a dozen uncalled seats that are still in the balance. Some of the others that haven't been called are likely to go to the Democrats. So meanwhile, all of this is causing Republican recriminations to break out and continue, with the House and the Senate Republicans preparing for leadership elections even before they know the results of the returns. Welcome. I'm Paul Gigot with Kim Strassel and Kyle Peterson, my two estimable colleagues. So as the results unfold a few days later, we can, I think, make some interesting judgments, more judgments about what happened. Let's do that kind of big picture before we get to the House and Senate races. And the biggest fact for me so far is the poor Republican performance with independents. Republicans turned out they got their own vote out. They may even win the vote for the House by something like 4 points, 5 points before this is over. But they'll only win the House if they do by about 1% of the seats, because so many of their votes were concentrated in safe Republican districts, not swing districts. And they lost among independents, depending on the two election-related surveys you believe. The AP Votecast had the Republicans losing independents by 4 points, the national media poll by 2. That just doesn't happen in midterm elections for the most part. Kyle, what do you make of it?
Yeah, I think it's a huge problem for the Republican Party. The other thing that I would point to in the national exit poll is people who say they somewhat disapprove of Joe Biden's performance. That was 10% of the electorate, and Democrats won those people by 4 points. And it is pretty hard to win a national election when you can't even win over the people who say they somewhat disapprove of the leader of the other party, how he's doing in office, President Joe Biden. And I think a lot of this comes back to, as we've discussed, some of it may be abortion after the decision overturning Roe v. Wade, the Dobbs decision this summer. But I think a lot of it is these candidates who were focused on President Trump's personal grievances and the 2020 election. And it seems like that is enough in at least some of the states, at least it was in 2020, to win a Republican primary. But it is, I think, repelling these independent voters and making it impossible for these candidates to win a general election. Even the most compelling of them, the best speaking of them, Carrie Lake is the one that I'm thinking of, a gubernatorial candidate in Arizona. Now looks like she may not have enough extra votes to pull ahead.
Yeah, Kim, I really do think abortion worked for the Democrats here. It helped motivate their voters. And I think the focus on democracy and the MAGA Republicans also drove Democratic turnout, which was really quite high, and especially in those swing states where the preliminary evidence is in the swing districts that Democrats actually won narrowly in those swing districts, so they'll have to wait for the final count. Overall, I think basically Democratic strategy was to make this a choice election between the two parties and between candidates in the parties in specific states and districts, rather than a referendum on Biden. When it was a referendum on Obama in 2010 and 2014, Republicans won. When it's a choice election like it was in 1998 when impeachment was so prominent, the Democrats did well with Clinton in the White House, and I think Democrats succeeded in making this a choice election.
Yeah, I could not agree more that if this had simply been a judgment on Joe Biden, probably would have been quite large GOP gains. The testament to how successfully Dees turned that around and made it, as you said, about abortion and also fears that Republicans were too extreme. And that goes back to that independent vote, because those independents often are the final judgment in these races. You noted Democrats' turnout was just about as good as Republicans. Both sides managed to get their base out, but it was those crucial independents. In 2018, when Donald Trump was the president and they were running midterms in the Democrats were attempting to take back over the House, independents broke 54% for the Democrats, the party that was out of power. Go back to 2010, Obama is president. Republicans are trying to take over the party out of power. Independents broke 56% for Republicans. You didn't see that happen this time, and it's particularly noticeable in those big Senate races that Republicans really needed to win. I mean, this is a stunning statistic, and over 40% of voters say that they are independent. 55% voted for Senator Kelly, the Democrat, over Blake Masters. And that was the final decider in these races. And they were clearly spooked by Democratic claims that Republicans would be awful on issues of abortion, democracy, elections, etc.
All right, let's turn to the House of Representatives, where the vote is extremely close. Let's listen to Nancy Pelosi talk about the vote count.
Let's just get through the election, okay? They haven't won yet. They've been measuring for draperies. They've been putting forth an agenda. They haven't won it yet. Let's after the election is concluded, depending on who is in the majority, there'll be judgments made within their own party, in our own parties, as to how we go forward.
Kim, looks right now, the betting markets have more than 90% chance that the Republicans will hold the House, as you look at the individual races that are still out, but so narrowly, 218, 19, or maybe they can eke out 220 votes. They need 218, but they could still also lose it. Where does it stand right now in your view?
That's exactly right. I think you said in the beginning it was 212 to 205, and that is a result, by the way. There have been a couple of important seats that Republicans have picked up, kind of crucial over the weekend to making those betting odds what they are. One in Arizona, another one in Oregon, a pickup seat where a very charismatic Republican candidate, Ms. Chavez Duremer, is going to become the first Republican Hispanic member of Congress from that state, but beat an interesting progressive who had won her primary. So those were a couple of important ones. There are a number of outstanding California districts. And what really matters there, Paul, is that a couple of Republicans hold on to seats. If they do that and flip a couple of others where they appear to be ahead, then that's how they get up to that number. But it is going to be a cat's whisker, Paul, if they do pull it off. And that's going to make governance extremely difficult for Kevin McCarthy.
And if Democrats do lose, however narrowly, the majority, Nancy Pelosi might be inclined to then retire. On the other hand, she loves the job, and she's actually very good at it in terms of promoting the Democratic agenda and maintaining discipline. She could say, all right, because the margin is so narrow, we could have a good chance of regaining the majority in 2024, and I could stay on for that. On the other hand, she'd be in her mid-80s by then, and there's a lot of pressure internally for her to step down. She will go out even if they lose the majority here as having been a very successful speaker. The Republicans are a bigger question.